Hi, I'm Sushant and welcome to this online tutorial by Quest. Inherited disorders of liver cirrhosis are rare but potentially correctable disorders. In this tutorial, let's focus on two such etiologies, Wilson's disease and hereditary hemochromatosis. Let's start our discussion with Wilson's disease. Wilson's disease is an autosomal recessive disorder of hepatic copper excretion. Here, the mutation is in what is known as ATP7B gene, which is present on chromosome number 13. This ATP7B gene codes for what is known as Wilson's ATPase. Now, the dietary copper is delivered to the liver. Within the liver cells, it is bound to proteins like metallochaperones, metallothioneins, and glutathione. And from the liver cells, a majority part is excreted within the bile. But a part of it is incorporated into what is known as apoceruloplasmin to produce ceruloplasmin. And this ceruloplasmin is secreted within the serum, and copper within the serum is largely present as ceruloplasmin. Wilson ATPase plays a role in the synthesis of ceruloplasmin. It also plays a role in the biliary excretion of copper. So if there is a deficiency of ATP7B protein, there is an increase in hepatic copper concentration. This increase in hepatic copper causes oxidative damage and later on starts presenting as hepatitis and liver cirrhosis. Also, there is going to be a decrease in the serum ceruloplasmin, whereas there is going to be an increase in the free copper which will spill over from the liver, leading to deposits into other tissues like brain and eyes. The commonest clinical feature then is the hepatic features of Wilson's disease. Patients would start at a very young age. Most of them would present to us with hepatitis by the teens, and patients will develop repeated episodes of hepatitis marked by jaundice and increase in liver enzymes, followed by cirrhosis, which would set in before the age of 40 years. Most of these patients, by the time they are 40, would develop decompensated cirrhosis and complications of liver cirrhosis. A clue over here is that patients who have Wilson's disease, because of the free copper in the blood, are going to have hemolytic anemia. So if you see a young person with hemolytic anemia and cirrhosis, think of Wilson's disease. One area where this free copper will be deposited is the brain tissue. So by the early 20s, patients are going to have neurological features. The deposition of copper would occur in the basal ganglia, in pons, medulla, thalamus, and cerebellum. Some of you might have realized that this is what constitutes the extrapyramidal system. So patients are going to have features of extrapyramidal system like dystonia, incoordination, and tremors. In fact, they are going to have features which look very similar to Parkinson's disease. Patients are also going to have dysarthria and dysphagia and autonomic dysfunction in form of bladder and bowel disturbances and sexual disturbances. Some patients can have neurologic features in form of memory loss. Up to half of the patients who have neurologic features would also develop psychiatric manifestations like depression, crying episodes, hyperactivity, and aggressive behavior. Important to remember here is what is not affected is the sensory system and the power of these patients. Psychiatric features along with neurologic features and hepatitis should get us thinking of Wilson's disease. Another typical area of copper deposition is in the Descemet's membrane of the cornea, leading to the popular KF rings. This can sometimes be detected on direct examination, but a screening with slit lamp examination is mandatory in suspected cases of Wilson's. Up to 30 to 50% cases of hepatitis due to Wilson's will show us the KF ring. But if the patient has neurologic features, more than 99% of such patients would have that ring. Also, patients can have asymptomatic cataracts known as the sunflower cataracts. Patients can have a list of other uncommon features like abortions, osteoarthritis, and renal manifestations like Fanconi syndrome. Now, diagnosis of Wilson's is only when we suspect it. We can diagnose it by documenting a low serum ceruloplasmin with an increase in free serum copper. We can also look out for the KF ring, look for the urinary excretion of copper. But the gold standard is to do a liver biopsy and prove the quantitative increase in copper. Looking at the treatment of Wilson's, the first drug that was available is D-penicillamine. But it is no longer the preferred drug because of high level of toxicity and also because it is known to worsen the neurologic features. In patients who have liver disorder, trientinin can be used as a chelating agent, but again, trientin is also not preferred if the patient has neurologic features. Nowadays, if the patient has only hepatic features of Wilson's without any psychiatric or neurologic manifestation, the most preferred drug is zinc. Zinc is known to decrease the intestinal absorption of copper, and it is best started when the patient is in the pre-symptomatic period. It has an advantage that it can also be used during pregnancy and of course in the pediatric population. The big problem with zinc is the severe gastritis it causes. If the patient has decompensated liver cirrhosis, then zinc along with trientine can be used. If the patient has neurologic disease, our options are very limited and we can consider tetrathiomolybdate. This is a chelating agent for free copper with a low neurologic toxicity. Final option would remain liver transplantation. From Wilson's, now let's move our attention to hemochromatosis. This is also an autosomal recessive group of disorders which presents with increased intestinal absorption of iron. This increased iron is deposited in the tissue and leads to organ dysfunction. There can be two categories of iron overload. One is what is known as hereditary hemochromatosis, and there could obviously be secondary causes of iron overload like hemolytic anemias or other liver disorders. Here we are focusing on the hereditary hemochromatosis. The most common gene involved in hereditary hemochromatosis is the HFE gene. A mutation that results in cysteine to tyrosine substitution at position 282, also known as C282Y mutation, is the commonest mutation in HFE. There can be other HFE mutations as well as non-HFE related causes of hereditary hemochromatosis. Let's move towards understanding pathophysiology of hemochromatosis. Here we have an increase in the absorption of iron. Now the iron that we get from the diet is predominantly in the ferric form. To absorb it, ferric reductase converts it into the ferrous form, and this is absorbed from the lumen via the divalent metal transporter or DMT1, predominantly present on the duodenal cells. Once iron is absorbed into the duodenal cell, it has to be sent into the plasma via the basal surface, and this is done by what is known as ferroportin. It is at this level that iron absorption is controlled by a peptide hormone known as hepcidin. Hepcidin is produced by the liver. It binds to ferroportin and causes its internalization and degradation. Therefore, presence of hepcidin means there is a decrease in the iron absorption from intestines and decrease in iron release from the macrophages. Hepcidin levels change as per the body's iron levels. They are also changed by inflammation and hypoxia. HFE and other such proteins work as the iron sensing mechanism for regulating hepcidin levels. So mutation in HFE leads to decrease in hepcidin release and therefore increases iron absorption, leading to hemochromatosis. Now, iron absorption is a slow feature. So clinical features of hemochromatosis typically start after the age of 40. Right from birth, there is a genetic predisposition, but there are no abnormalities for the first 10 years of life. After the first decade, there is iron overload, but still no symptoms till the age of 20. Between the age of 20 to 40 years, patients can develop non-specific features like lethargy, arthralgia, and loss of libido. But it's only after 40 that specific organs get damaged and patients develop significant symptoms. And the most common organ to be damaged, as well as the first organ to be damaged, is the liver. More than 95% of symptomatic patients of hemochromatosis present to us with hepatomegaly. Eventually, they would progress towards developing cirrhosis and its complications like portal hypertension and ascites. Unfortunately, 30% of these cirrhotic patients would develop hepatocellular carcinoma. So we need to watch out these patients for development of HCC. The clue can come from other organ involvement, like patients can have bronze colored skin pigmentation. Also, up to 65% of patients can develop diabetes mellitus because of damage to the pancreas. A common feature seen in up to 50% patients is that small joints of the hands would develop arthropathy. Patients can have heart failure as well as arrhythmias, and patients can develop hypogonadism due to deposition of iron within the hypothalamus and pituitary. This can manifest with decreased libido, impotence, amenorrhea, testicular atrophy, and gynecomastia. If we get a patient who has these typical clinical features, we should suspect hemochromatosis. But to diagnose hemochromatosis, we need to prove that there is increase in the total body iron. This can be done in a variety of ways by documenting increase in serum iron, by documenting increase in the fasting transferrin saturation percentage, by showing that there is an increase in the storage of iron in form of increased serum ferritin, or by doing a liver biopsy not only to show increase in iron but to rule out cirrhosis and hepatocellular carcinoma. Patients can be periodically tested with an MRI of the liver to look out for possibility of hepatocellular carcinoma. Since this is an autosomal recessive disorder, all first degree relatives of these patients should be screened for mutations. Let's move towards understanding treatment of hemochromatosis. Our strategy here is to remove iron, and the treatment of choice is phlebotomy. That means we remove around 500 ml of blood at a time, and this can be done 1 to 2 times per week. In a symptomatic patient, this can be done right up to 1 to 2 years with a target of reducing serum ferritin to less than 50 microgram per liter. Once that has been achieved, phlebotomy can be done every 1 to 3 months. We also have the option of using chelating agents, but they tend to be toxic agents. If the patient has developed organ damage, appropriate therapy for that organ damage should be started. If there are any questions regarding Wilson's disease or hemochromatosis, feel free to discuss with me on the Quest tab or during our lectures. Thank you and Jai Hind.